Hi, everybody. This is Marlene with Eerie News, and today is January 2nd, 2024. It is, yes, Tuesday, January 2nd, 2024. To everybody, Happy New Year. Wishing you and yours all the best for the upcoming year. I think it promises of anything to be anything but boring. But, like they say, it's good to live in interesting times. And we do live in interesting times. Well, let's get on to the first story. The first story is out of Stranger Than Fiction Stories, and it's titled Beautiful but Haunted Sights from Around the World. There are locations from around the world which are scenic, but for all their beauty and historical significance come with a turbulent past and troubled souls that refuse to rest in peace. The first site is called Salto del Tenquedama, approximately 18 miles southwest of Bogota, Colombia, on a precarious cliff. Hotel Estación del Salto de Tequendama was built between 1923 and 1927 by architects Pablo de la Cruz, Joseph Martins, and Carlos Arturo Tapias. The building faces a picturesque waterfall which flows downward over 500 feet into the Bogota River. President Pedro Nel Ospina was in power, and in 1924 a train station was built along the canyon overlooking the falls. It brought wealthy patrons to the fog-shrouded heights to enjoy lavish parties. Present day, only the platform's handrails, partially buried, can be seen above the highway. By 1929, an addition was built to accommodate the guests, but this optimism was short-lived. A year later, as a consequence of the Great Depression, the patrons dwindled away. It never recaptured the status it once had during the 1920s, when Colombia's elites would ride the train to enjoy its hospitality. Nonetheless, it operated thus for the next 60 years as a hotel and then a restaurant under the name of Hotel El Salto, which in Spanish translates to the jump. In 1950, plans were made to expand the structure to an 18-story hotel, but this never came to fruition. The Hotel del Salto remained unchanged until the building became too damaged to receive guests. It closed in the 1990s due to lack of upkeep, and it was left derelict. From then until 2012, squatters and legend trippers were the only ones to visit the old structure. Fueled by its picturesque setting and remoteness, suicides romanticize the spot as a place to end their lives by jumping from a point above the falls. It is reported the Muisca Indians also hurled themselves from the spot long before the hotel was built. It is the ghosts of these unfortunate souls which are said to haunt the crumbling hotel and the grounds. However, according to the caretaker, back in the old days, bar fights would break out on the second story. Some of them would end up on the balcony, where it was easy for a drunkard to fall over the railing to their deaths. Employees describe screams echoing around the structure and a heavy presence at times. It became a museum in 2012 and was renovated. It opens only on the weekends. Yes, and let me tell you, for those of you watching the video version of this is when they say this is on a sheer cliff, this thing is on a sheer cliff. All right, and I can see why maybe they they had to build a train to get people up there, and of course it's you could tell for the ones watching, this is got it's very picturesque and to look at it, but I can see why people would have to take a train versus an automobile to get up there. Okay, the second site is called Lecumberri Prison. The Black Palace of Lecumberri, El Palacio Negro de Lecumberri, is located in Mexico City. It served as a penitentiary from 1900 to 1976 and now houses the National Archive. It replaced Belén Prison as the main prison in Mexico City. During its construction, it earned its name as the Black Palace, since just prior to its inauguration, the area was flooded with dirty water which turned the walls black. Construction started on the building in 1888 with the intent of housing criminals and those who opposed the government. It was built using the panopticon design, which allowed for a single guard to observe all the prisoners without them being able to tell when the guard was looking, therefore making the inmates feel they were always being watched. The prison was built to hold 800 men, 180 women, and 400 children. It had 804 cells, workshops, a nursery, cooking and baking workshops. There was also an area of government, a section dedicated to medical, and waiting rooms. It was inaugurated by President Porfirio Diaz at the turn of the 20th century. Pancho Villa, a general of the Mexican Revolution, was the first to make an escape from the prison in 1912. In 1913, President Francisco Madero and Vice President Jose Maria Pino Suarez were murdered en route to Lecumberri during the coup d'etat known as La Decena Trágica. The living conditions within the prison were very dangerous due to the inmates' treatment by the guards or staff. Let's not forget, criminals were housed there, some more violent than others, but no doubt there were psychopaths and sociopaths among them, who preyed on weaker prisoners. Corruption, torture, and beatings were common. In 1954, it started to accept female prisoners. Even in a prison, there were some places which were worse than others. Cell 614, which is behind the boilers and made of metal, heated up so much during the day that prisoners suffocated. There was an open-air cage where there was no shade or roof, and the prisoners endured the elements. It is unknown how many died there. By the 1970s, it housed about 4,000 prisoners, in excess of its original plan. Homosexual prisoners were sent to the J section, where the term Jotos came from. Another who escaped Lecumberri prisoner was Dwight Worker, an American convicted of smuggling cocaine. With the aid of his then-wife, Worker escaped on December 17, 1975, disguised as a woman. In a place where torture and murder were common, it is no surprise that it developed a reputation for being haunted. Disembodied screams have been heard by employees. Sightings are so plentiful that they are referred to as Lecumberri's ghosts. One of them is known as Don Jacinto, and he wanders the corridors at night muttering, "Again, Amelia didn't come." Jacinto is believed to have been a janitor who worked at Lecumberri and died in the 1940s. Some say he was a prisoner who was betrayed by Amelia. Present day, millions of records are kept in what was once prison cells. Over 60,000 secret police files, made public in 2002, are housed there. It also has 6 million photographs, and surprisingly, a doll that was used in a trial for witchcraft. Next location is called Gran Hotel de Viena. Located in Córdoba, Argentina, the history of the Gran Hotel Vienna begins with a German named Max Pauke in 1904, who traveled to Argentina in search of work. Max met and married an Austrian woman named Melita Fleischesberger in Uruguay about 10 years later. About 1938, Melita and the children traveled to the area of the Ancenusa River to partake of mud baths for their health. Shortly thereafter, she partnered with the owner of the small hotel where she was staying. However, the partnership was short-lived and the Paukis bought her out. Architects were hired to design a building in the place of the small pension which they had bought. The intent was to provide a 5-star hotel which would cater to European tourists. Constructed on the shores of Mar Chiquita de Laguna, the mud baths would be used to draw in those seeking natural health remedies. The hotel contained 84 rooms, a medical facility equipped with doctors, nurses, and massage therapists, a library, bank, dining room sitting 200, granite floors, walls lined with Carrara marble, bronze chandeliers, wine cellar, slaughterhouse, and bakery. It was the only hotel with air conditioning and heating systems in each facility, a large pool divided into salt water and fresh water, electricity generating plant, garages with their own fuel supply, and a food warehouse. The construction, which was started in 1940, was completed in December 1945. Argentina declared war on Germany 10 days before it surrendered. Because of the Allied victory, Max was asked to leave his position in the Mannesmann Company. This, along with several cases of abuse associated with employees of the hotel, forced Max to move his family in March of 1946. The hotel closed in 1947. It is believed that President Juan Domingo Perón, who came to work on June 4, 1946, allowed Nazis and their families to come into the country. It's believed that approximately 80,000 German and Austrians fled to Argentina. In addition, there was a number of Croatians and Italians who were fascist sympathizers. Rumors are that several stayed at the Gran Hotel Vienna, and Nazi money had funded the building of the hotel with its hospital wing. Officially, the hotel closed in 1947 and reopened in 1962, but only partially. Between then and 1977, when it was flooded, it had been damaged by theft and vandalism. Max Jr. continued as the owner. The municipal authorities allowed families to move there after the flood. They described the sound of steps in the hallways, the sound of jingling keys, as if someone were checking the doors. The sound would stop at room 106, which became known as El Cuarto del Fantasma, or the Phantom's Room. According to many testimonies, there are at least two ghosts. One of these ghosts is a security guard who has appeared in some tourist pictures with his distinctive mustache, and some people have even reported hearing the sound of his keys as well as the steps around the hotel. The other ghost is supposedly his non-official lover, who disappeared in the hotel back in the 1940s. Another legend attached to the hotel dates from World War II. It is said that by the end of 1945, some residents of Miramar, which is Córdoba, gave witness with great conviction to having seen in the vicinity of the Gran Hotel Vienna, walking very early in the morning, a mysterious old man, withered and trembling, someone that clearly was not from the village. He wore a long green overcoat and a beret of the same color. Lonely and brooding, the old man spoke to no one, but early Miramar risers had seen him somewhere, and after some search of their memory, identification came quickly. The old man was none other than the defeated Führer of Germany, Adolf Hitler. What was it that gave him away? Was it his unique mustache, or did he inadvertently slip a salute with his right arm extended? Nobody knows. There are no photographs or evidence that irrefutably certify the presence of such a character in that remote corner of Cordoba. The only thing that there is are rumors, stories circulating by word of mouth, confirming the biggest conspiracy ever organized after World War II. What could Adolf Hitler have been up to in Miramar? What relationship did the Führer have with the Grand Hotel Vienna? The main wing of the hotel was the most luxurious. According to Harry Cooper, author of Hitler in Argentina, a Spanish spy claimed to have seen Hitler dragged from the bunker. He was taken to South America and died in 1962. Cooper claims that it was unusual that the hotel had a plastic surgery clinic that was located in a small town 400 miles away from Buenos Aires. He believes Nazis were coming there to change their appearance. The hotel, when operating, had a bank, post office, telephone communications center, laundry, mechanic shop, a pool, large freezers, and a bakery. Juan Cámaras, a journalist, wrote a book, Odessa al Sur, La Argentina como refugio de nazis y criminales de guerra, which translates to Odessa to the south, Argentina is a refuge for Nazis and war criminals. He agrees with Cooper that at the end of World War II, South America became a haven and then home for hundreds of Germans, Austrians, and Croatians escaping from Europe. Argentina was one of the countries where they exiled themselves to, especially in the cities of Bariloche, Córdoba, and Buenos Aires. There was another hotel in Miramar run by Antonio Eles named Hotel Las Vegas, who was said to be a Nazi sympathizer. Argentinian journalist Abel Basti, who wrote Tras los Pasos de Hitler, following in Hitler's trail, is another that agrees with Cooper that Hitler didn't commit suicide and came to Argentina in 1945 after crossing the Atlantic in a ship. According to Basti, the Pakis invested close to what today would be $25 million in the hotel's construction in a far place, which coincidentally the Eichhorn family, owners of the Hotel El Eden, who were one of Hitler's financiers, held property at. He postulates the funds came from the Third Reich. The security chief at the hotel was a German named Martin Kruger. Of the 70 employees, all spoke German or were German. He wrote that the hotel was closed in March 1946, and the only one left behind was Kruger, and he was found dead a few months later in one of the rooms. There were rumors of a possible poisoning. In 2010, Ghost Hunters International visited the hotel and conducted an investigation. Legend trippers and ghost hunters previously had recorded footsteps, sighs, and pounding against the walls. The show interviewed the mayor of the town of Miramar, who said that in the 1940s, hotel management hired the staff from Buenos Aires instead of the local populace in order to keep them in the dark about what was going on there. Room 61 is where Hitler was supposed to stay. The caretaker's family had seen a light floating up the stairs at the wing, which was a hospital, also the noise of boots on the floor. Room 106 was where a woman saw a man sitting in a bathtub. He looked like a real man, not a ghost. Room 110 had the sound of a radio with static coming from inside a closet. Present-day guides to the hotel tell visitors there have been sightings of children or men with mustaches. Mac Pocky, grandson of the original owner, is presently disputing the ownership of the hotel, which was taken over by the municipality. He claims to have paperwork where it was lent to the municipal authorities for a temporary time, whereas the authorities claim they were forced to take it over due to the structure being abandoned. Despite the claims, there is no definitive proof that Hitler survived, and if he did, that he came to the hotel. The hotel area was always forbidden for Miramar inhabitants, said Patricia Zapata, a member of the Civil Association of Friends of the Grand Hotel Vienna. No one came very close to the building. This was the German area. We were very afraid, especially when we were kids. Whoever it is that haunts the ruins of the hotel, no doubt, are still reliving the skullduggery and conspiracy that circulated among the guests and those that worked at El Gran Hotel Vienna in the aftermath of World War II. Yeah, something, food for thought. Our next site is called El Castillo del Gringo Loco. The legend that surrounds El Castillo del Gringo Loco, or the Crazy Gringo's castle, located in Sangolequi, Ecuador, is as mysterious as ever. There's a series of caves underneath the structure. The building belonged to the Hacienda Santa Clara, which was owned by a Frenchman who got the moniker of El Gringo Loco. Why he was called a gringo if he was French is unknown. He was about 60 years old, and he was frequently seen taking solitary walks in the surrounding area. There were also rumors that he had built a secret labyrinth of caves nearby. When he died, the structure was left abandoned. Walls that surround the building date back to the beginning of the 20th century. In one version, he was a German or French soldier who fled to Ecuador to escape the horrors of World War II in Europe. He brought his wife and daughters with him. It appeared he was mentally disturbed and one day ran after them throughout the property, eventually catching them and killing them. He then disappeared and the construction stopped on the structure. In another version, the owner and his wife lose a daughter, and they slowly go mad wandering around the structure and caves. It's said you can hear the child crying in the dead of the night. Throughout the years, it's gained a reputation as a place where some would gather to perform dark rituals. In another version, to perform dark rituals, Fausto Navarrete has a house nearby, and he tells the story that one day he had some friends over. They started to drink and decided to explore the caves. He described where everything on the property was overgrown, lichen covered the stones, and the place looked like a mausoleum. While exploring, they came across the bloody head of a ram that seemed to have been used in some type of occult ceremony. They also found discarded women's underwear. Another story is about a group of teenagers who in 1991 participated in rituals there and wrote their names on the wall of the Castillo de Gringo Loco. Within a short amount of time, they each died under tragic circumstances. So there. If you want to take, if you're going down South America way, that's the place to go to. Anyway, let's go on to the next story. This is out of New York Post, and it is titled, "I found a secret room hidden in my basement. I was shocked by its mysterious origins." You know, for all those DIYers that, you buy an old house and sometimes you find more than you expect. Now, this is a chamber of secrets. Misty Ipong recently stumbled upon a secret walled-off room in the creepy basement of her 200-year-old home and took to TikTok to crack the mysterious case. It all started when the couple, who had just recently moved into the upstate New York house in June, discovered some sort of leak in the bowels of the building, but the source was unidentifiable, and water appeared to be flowing out from underneath a wall. Then we noticed, Ipong explained on her video with a 2.8 million views, that definitely it's a bricked-in wall. New stone, at least when compared to the surrounding walls, was placed in the shape of what would have been the doorway to the mysterious room, which was shockingly missed despite multiple inspections. "If I had a choice, no, I wouldn't open it up," she said, while her husband chipped away at the cinder block barricade. We'll take a look at it in a minute. Yeah, you could tell that this is not the original stuff. Since the leak was likely caused by a pipe located behind the brick, the couple began the tedious process of removing the cinder blocks to unearth what was behind it. After clearing the energy with sage, of course. But the couple was down on their luck. The room, they learned after days of attempting to hammer through the bricks, was full of what appeared to be rocks, forcing them to find another way to break into the secret chamber. Viewers invested in Ipong's secret rooms theorized that the home could have been part of the Underground Railroad, which was used to help enslaved people escape to the north. Upon further investigation, the couple revealed that their Clarkson, New York home once belonged to Lucy Blodgett, who might have had ties to the Underground Railroad. While it's unclear whether the house really has ties to the Freedom routes or why exactly the mysterious room had been sealed, some some viewers warned Ipong, do not disturb it out of the fear the house would cave in. Okay. Am I the only one that thinks the room is sealed off for a reason? Mused one person. Could definitely be a way to fix the structure of the house. My brother works in concrete and has filled in basements, rooms to stabilize the house. If the garage is over that sealed room, those rocks could be supporting the foundation of it. I'd get someone to look at it. I would too. I don't know. I don't know. See, that's where the curious does battle with the practical. Yeah, it makes you think. Okay, I got to be careful. Like all of a sudden, yeah, this thing. But let's see. Let's see if it'll. Nah, that's not it. I was hoping that we could catch it. Let's see. Well, for those of you seeing it, it's you could tell it's an old-fashioned, you know, house out in New York. But I'm telling you, well, you never know. Maybe she'll find a treasure. I mean, let's face it. That's what everybody always thinks. When you find it, like, I'm gonna find something there, and yay, that kind of deal. Anyway, let's go back to Stranger Than Fiction stories. This is titled The Omen of Death. In Appalachian culture, a sure omen of death was something found in the pillows of those who were ill. It is a bizarre phenomenon known as feather crowns. Different cultures have their own version of premonitions of death. In Appalachia, a circular crown or nest found in the pillows of those dying or recently dead are called death crowns. They point inward and could only be found with feather pillows. In recent times, where pillows are made from synthetic fibers, this phenomena has disappeared. Also known as angel crowns, the stories about these portents of death were found in the remote areas of Missouri, Indiana, and Ohio. Finding one in the pillow of someone who was ill was a sign they would die in 3 days. A woman who was going through her father's belongings after he was killed as a pedestrian found something solid inside his feather pillow. She pulled out a wreath of feather about the size of a bird's nest. These crowns are seen as a sign the person is destined for heaven. If it's found before the person dies, an old wives' tale is that if it's broken, the death of the person is prevented. In 1972, Hildred Norwood told the story of when her late father, John Haggard, 66, died in 1927 at Okmulgee, Oklahoma. The feather pillow he slept on was checked, and not one but three death crowns were found inside. One measured 3.5 inches in diameter and was perfectly shaped clockwise. She kept the feather circles with her since the year of her father's death. Nola Warren of Linden, Tennessee described that when her 6-year-old brother died, the family had found a crown in his pillow. They kept it in a small box since then. She said that when her mother found the crown in the pillow of her child, it helped take away the grief. She saw it as a good omen that her son had gone to heaven. In 1994, Lois Addison wrote the following about an experience in childhood. Quote, I am 82. When I was 6, my dad took us children and our mother to the home of a friend who had a very sick child. These people lived way back in the pines in Louisiana and were very poor. The child died while we were there, and I saw the mother open the pillow and take out a crown of feather. All the family was comforted by that. The crown was a sign for them that the little girl went to heaven. See, it's very interesting. I mean, it wasn't just the negative of a portent of something bad. For some, they saw it as a way to be comforted. Next story is out of Explorer's Web, and it's titled Ancient Skeleton from Southern Russia Surprises UK Scientists. When workers on a British road improvement project excavated a nondescript skeleton buried alone, it might have raised some eyebrows. But it didn't pull the same weight among the archaeologists who finished the job until they applied high-tech tools. Alfred Clooney was, I guess this is the how they, I don't know, identified the remains. Alfred Clooney 203645 was a complete, well-preserved male skeleton buried without any personal effects in a Cambridgeshire ditch. A team led by Francis Crick Institute could tell the remains were clearly ancient, but with no contextual clues to go on they might have hit a dead end. Updated forensic technology intervened and provided the first biological proof of a certain far-flung immigration pattern during the Roman Empire. The man was a Sarmatian, and the team's test proof he made it from his homeland in what is now the southern Russia-Ukraine area to his final destination in the United Kingdom. It's a journey of about 2,400 kilometers, and he likely did it as a Roman cavalry soldier or servant. How did the researchers find out? First, they extracted DNA from a tiny bone in his inner ear. This turned out to be his best preserved body part, containing the most complete DNA samples. Dr. Marina Silva of the Ancient Genomics Laboratory at the Francis Crick Institute extracted and analyzed the samples for the study. This is not like testing the DNA of someone alive, she said. The DNA is very fragmented and damaged. However, we were able to decode enough of it. The first thing we saw was that genetically he was very different from the Romano-British individuals they'd previously studied. Sarmatians were nomads, distinguished by their horsemanship and their Iranian mother tongue. They were especially active during the first several centuries AD, which is when Alfred Cluny died. His grave dates to about 126 to 228 AD. Historical records show that he could have been the son or slave of a cavalry soldier. During his lifetime, a unit of the Sarmatian cavalry joined the Roman army and deployed to the UK. That still didn't connect the dots, though. How could the scientists prove that he was born in Eurasia and immigrated to the place of his death? For this, they examined his teeth. Even 2 millennia after his death, the tissue harbored chemicals in varying amounts at different layers. Alfred Cluny underwent pronounced dietary changes at age 5 and 9 and began to level out at about 13. The changes the team found followed chemical trends you would expect from a person adapting to available food sources while traveling west across Europe. Millets and sorghum grains, scientifically called C4 crops, are plentiful in the region where Sarmatians lived. These dissipated in his diet as he matured. Wheat, more common in Western Europe, replaced them. The analysis tells us that he, and not his ancestors, made the journey to Britain. As he grew up, he migrated west, and these plants disappeared from his diet. In the end, it's still a story about an inconsequential person undergoing a migration he probably influenced very little. What's the takeaway? Well, if you ever want to recover your tracks, don't leave your teeth or your ear canals where any archaeologist can find them. There you go. Interesting. And by the way, I found out the hard way about that inner ear bone. My son, when he was little, my youngest, he fell out of the bunk bed, and believe it or not, he broke that little bone in there. And it is so rare because he fell. That was a bad experience. I had to take him to the hospital and everything. But it was so unusual that all the residents, this was in a children's hospital I took him to. All the residents that were there, I guess in their specialty, we had a line of them coming in there with the main doctor so they could look at it, because to actually see this broken bone inside the ear was so rare that we had a line of them coming to stick the little thing. And you know what? There's nothing. It heals on its own. So there's my 2 cents worth about the inner ear bone. All right. Let's go back to Stranger Than Fiction, and this is titled Dying for Affection. Amy Murphy, 17, died mysteriously. Her body was found lying in the Golden Gate Park on February 2nd, 1900. It was in a partially secluded area down on Hay Street by the big eucalyptus tree that stood on the left just beyond the Peacock Walk. First, there was a suspicion she died by her own hand, but others thought it was murder. The gun, which fired the bullet found in the girl's head, mysteriously disappeared, which made the theory of self-destruction questionable. Later it was found out she had pawned her watch in order to buy the firearm. Once her body was identified, police rounded up Horace Pullen, who was supposedly the man Amy ended her life over. He was taken to the place where Amy committed the act, and then to McAvoy's undertaking parlor at 1235 Market Street to view the body. A certain Mr. Cook came forward to say he had been sitting on a bench in the park when he heard 3 shots ring out. Then he heard footsteps of someone running down the path towards him. 3 boys appeared, one of them with his hand under his coat, as if concealing something. They seemed to be no older than 14 years old. When the boys saw him, they stopped for a moment, then they ran down one of the paths and out of sight. Were they a witness to the crime, or perhaps did they take the revolver? The authorities never got an answer to that question. The mystery deepened when during the autopsy a large irregular gash was found on the right side of Amy's head in front of her ear. Coroner Cole opined this was made by a blow with a blunt weapon of some sort, possibly the butt of a heavy pistol. There were no powder marks around it. A large caliber bullet was removed from the brain, and the question was which had caused her death, the bullet or the blow. Amy's mother and younger sister came to the morgue to identify the remains. They described where she had deceived her family, telling them she worked at night at a telephone office when in reality she was keeping company with a wine agent named Horace Poulin. This had been going on for 8 months. However, once Poulin found out that she had been an inmate of the Magdalen Asylum, he cast her off. Or at least this is a justification he gave for the end of their relationship. It turned out that Amy had been sent to the Magdalen Asylum 4 years before. Amy's father was Dan Murphy, a liquor dealer who lived in Seattle. Several years before her parents had separated, Mr. Murphy took the 2 eldest children, which were Amy and Harry, and the mother kept the 2 babies. Amy stayed with her father for a couple of years before returning to her mother in California, who in the meantime had married Captain John Creeling Dart of the steamer Sparrow. It's not clear if Amy was sent to the Magdalen Asylum by her father in Seattle or by her stepfather. However, there was a stigma attached to a girl that had been sent there. The Magdalen Asylum was founded in 1856 by the Sisters of Mercy as a refuge for prostitutes, but in 1868 it began taking in girls who were sentenced to the city's industrial school, which was a juvenile prison. Parents could ask the court to send their uncontrollable daughters to the asylum. A girl could end up there if the police charged her with vagrancy or for keeping company with gangsters or prostituting themselves. Many of them were orphans. Once a girl turned 18, she could leave if her parents or caregiver petitioned it. In some cases, some ran away. Soon after the turn of the 20th century, it was renamed to St. Catherine's Home for the Wayward Girls. It was sold to the city in 1931, where it housed the mentally ill and was a maternity hospital. But it seemed Amy Murphy was a troubled girl, since according to her younger sister, Winnie Murphy, Amy had spoken of doing away with herself and even asked her brother Fred the best way to do it. Her siblings did not believe she would commit this act. She was described as being content in her behavior and had gotten a job in a phonograph parlor on Kearny Street. When her mother learned she had not worked for months, she said the girl brought her money at the end of the month, claiming it was her salary. There were many times Amy would tell her mother she was sleeping over at her friend Nellie Peters' house when this was not true. Her mother was unaware that her daughter had spoken of taking her life. Only her younger sister knew of this. Winifred Murphy quoted her sister saying, "If I don't get another position in a day or 2, I will kill myself." After Amy's death, her sister said she didn't believe her sister would commit suicide and that she was murdered by someone. Horace Poulin, who was the city agent of the Eisen Vineyard Company, was accused of luring a 17-year-old girl from her family with promises of luxurious living. He gave a formal statement to the chief of police that read thus, quote, "I was introduced to Amy C. Murphy about last July by Mrs. Toomey, a telephone operative who worked with this girl. About a week after I became acquainted with her, she told me how miserable she was at home. I took pity on her and told her that I would pay her what the telephone company was paying if she would come to live with me. During our acquaintance in December, I learned that she had been an inmate of the Magdalen Asylum for 3 months, and I asked her if such were the fact, and she acknowledged it. So my attentions to her cooled, and she saw it was going to be the end of it. I told her finally, in justice to myself, that our relations had to cease. She went home as usual in the morning, and Saturday afternoon sent for one of the boys in the office, a Mr. Mail from the Carrollton at Golden Gate Avenue and Market Street. He called up there and found her in a distressed condition and pretty full and saying she was going to end it all. He came and repeated this matter to me. I went up there and found the gas partly turned on. I told her not to make a fool of herself and took her to my house, put her to bed while I went to get something to eat. I left both my gas jets off, and on my return found both turned on, with a room full of gas. I was very much alarmed and sought my brother in the Orpheum, who was taking in the show, and he returned with me and spent the night with me in order to prevent her from repeating this. The next morning, Sunday, she was in a more rational frame of mind, and I left her to go home. Tuesday afternoon, she called at 114 Sutter Street, and I met her on the sidewalk. She asked me my opinion about her taking a position in a phonograph place on Kearney Street near California. I asked her the nature of the work, and she said it was attending to some phonograph machines that a young lady can operate. I looked at the place and advised her that it was not the first class order. It was not of the first class order, but to suit herself about taking the position. I told her if she was in need of any money, that I would give it to her, that if she wanted to visit her old home in Eureka, that I would give her the money. I even suggested to her to go visit her father, Dan Murphy, a saloon keeper of Seattle. I left her to go and attend to my business at the corner of Market and Grant Avenue. That is the last I saw of her. I asked her what her plans were. She told me to go and see her sister Winnie and she would tell me her plans. Under further questioning by police, he said he had known Amy Murphy was one under. Let me start that again. Under further questioning by police, he said he had known Amy Murphy 1 week before he asked her to come live with him. He had taken her to a flat on Bush Street and then to other places, always posing as if they were married. When asked if he intended to marry her, he said, "Well, there was some talk about that between us." The police wanted to know if they had been living together as man and wife for so many months, why was he ready to discard her because she had been an inmate at the Magdalene Asylum? His reply was, "Well, I had to send her away in justice to myself." He admitted he had tired of her. He described where on a daily basis she would stay at her mother's house till 8 p.m., then pass the early evening as she pleased, and then around midnight she would join him at the saloon at 114 Sutter Street, which was his headquarters. When police searched Poulin's flat at 821 Bush Street, they found a number of Amy's trinkets and a pair of slippers wrapped in newspaper and thrust in a closet. During the last time that Amy was with him, Poulin had told his landlady to keep an eye on her since she had attempted twice to kill herself. However, when the landlady arrived, she found all the windows were open. Was there a reason why Poulin wanted to make others believe that Amy was suicidal when she wasn't? Then police spoke to John Panalap, 27, who worked for Sherman Clay and Company, who sold musical supplies. He was living in Oakland for only a couple of months. He had moved to San Francisco 5 years before from Salem, Oregon. He said he had met Amy, but she used the name of Amy Dart. They had met about 18 months before, and he had at times called on her at her mother's house. Days before her death, she had sent him a letter to meet her in San Francisco a few days later. However, she failed to meet him on the agreed-upon date. Planalap knew who Poulin was and had met him once at Amy's house, but he was unaware of the relationship he had with Amy. Amy's friend, Nellie Peters, contrary to her family, did believe the girl shot herself over her failed romance with Poulin. Amy had told her that they were to be married and were only waiting for her to turn 18. Her birthday was in February, the very month she died. No doubt Poulin had cast her off since once she turned 18, Amy expected they would be married, and perhaps that had never been in his plans. Amy told Nellie that she was unhappy because of the harsh treatment she received at home, but her troubles went back to when her mother left her father, and she and her brother were left to the mercy of a father who was unkind. She ran away from her father and came seeking her mother, who she said was not affectionate towards her, and that she was wrapped up in the child of her second husband. She was made to feel she was not wanted in her mother's home. Her mother had one daughter named Geraldine with Captain Dart, who was 4 years old when Amy died. Amy said that Horace Poulin was the only person in the world who showed her any affection or was really kind to her. Then she confided that she would never marry Mr. Poulin, that he drank, and she was afraid she would be unhappy with him. When Nellie urged her to go and tell her mother everything, she became frightened at this suggestion. Her mother suspected that she was not telling her the real reason why she couldn't be married to Poulin. Nellie then told her to go see her friends in Eureka and have nothing more to do with Poulin. However, Amy didn't take this advice. Ultimately, nothing came of a short investigation as to what truly happened to Amy Murphy. Some believed it was suicide, others believed it was murder. A charge of adultery made against Horace Poulin by the police was dismissed by a judge. He was called a street leper by the newspapers of the area, and his reputation was tarnished, to say the least. Horace's troubles weren't over, though. In 1901, he was accused of embezzling $45 by a liquor merchant. Poulin had left for New York because of the scandal, but returned to San Francisco because of this new job offer. No doubt the sentiment of his involvement in Amy Murphy's death was still held against him. He settled the matter and dropped from sight. In 1920, Amy's father, Daniel Murphy, was found floating in Puget Sound. It's unknown if it was accidental or a suicide. However, he was known to have, quote, suffered occasionally from melancholia. That's how they called depression back then. His obituary only referred to a son, Harry Murphy, and a brother, William Murphy, as a surviving family. There was no sign of robbery, and he had a checkbook with an $11,000 balance, which back then was a lot of money. Harry Murphy, which was Amy's brother, became a well-known political cartoonist who was employed by various newspapers. He had started his career when he was only 17 years old and living in Washington. He passed away in 1973. John Planalp, the would-be suitor who perhaps would have given Amy a happier destiny, died in 1927. And again, she pawns her things, gets the gun, but somebody that's there hears three shots. Three shots? And the gun is never found. Did those kids get a hold of the gun? But what about the shots? And then, she's got what looks like some type of bruising to her head. Did that happen when she fell? Okay, and here's this guy who took up with her but wants to get rid of her, probably because when she turns 18, she's going to say, well, now we can get married, because at that time, prior to 18, she would have had to get parental an okay. And again, if you had ever been sent to the Magdalene thing, that was like, you were a bad girl. Let's put it nicely. So, who knows? But and see, the thing is this: her and her brother Harry both went off with their dad. Her brother Harry became, when he is a very, if you look up his cartoons, he became a very, very well known, and he did a lot of political cartoons. And he died obviously in 1973 of old age. It's like, here these, and I know everybody's different. They both start off in the same thing, as she unfortunately did away with herself, and he went on to become very, very successful. So there you go. Tale of Two Cities kind of deal. So let's go on. Let's go back to New York Post. This is titled, "One of Nostradamus' terrifying predictions came true hours into 2024." I hadn't heard about this one. I'm curious. It was a literal groundbreaking prophecy. As if Nostradamus' foretellings weren't eerily accurate enough, the iconic astrologer was apparently right on the money with yet another apocalyptic prophecy just hours into 2024, the New Year's Day earthquake. Also known as the Prophet of Doom, the 16th century French philosopher is best known for his foreboding forecast, which he chronicled in his 1555 text Les Prophéties. These 943 verses are somewhat too vague to be sure, but Nostradamus has been credited with predicting everything from the rise of Adolf Hitler to COVID-19, like a 450-year-old Century Simpsons cartoon. This time, the Frenchman was credited with forecasting the powerful earthquake that rocked Japan on New Year's Day. Outlining his predictions for 2024, the oracle wrote, "The dry earth will become more parched and there will be great floods." The psychic's followers reckoned that he could have been referring to the 7.5 magnitude tremor that struck the nation's western coast around 4 p.m. Monday, killing 48 people, toppling buildings, and sparking 3-foot-high tsunamis. According to reports, residents in coastal communities fled to higher ground as the waves battered this coast, sweeping houses and cars into the sea. Currently, there are around 120 cases of people awaiting rescue, a government spokesperson reported. In response, officials dispatched a 3,000-strong search and rescue squad comprised of Army personnel, firefighters, and police officers to the disaster area on the Noto Peninsula and Ishikawa Prefecture. The search and rescue of those impacted by the quake is a battle against time, Prime Minister Fumio Kishida declared during an emergency meeting on Tuesday. Nostradamus' prediction was apparently not the only harbinger of a seismic calamity. Over the summer, divers in Taiwan encountered an injured giant oarfish, the doomsday fish, which is said to be a sign of impending earthquakes. This seismic superstition is based on Japanese mythology, which states that plankton eater, which lives between 656 to 3,200 feet below the ocean surface, will intentionally rise to the surface ahead of an incoming tremor. In retrospect, many Doomsday subscribers believe that this latest sighting was connected to the New Year's quake. The legend is that if you see an oarfish, aka Doomsday fish, it is a warning sign from higher powers that disasters such as earthquakes are soon to occur. Yeah, see, for those of you watching, that's an oarfish. They're very unusual. You can tell those big eyes that they come from very, very deep waters. They referenced the 2011 Fukushima earthquake and tsunami, which saw dozens of these alleged seagoing seismometers wash ashore in the 2 years preceding the catastrophe. However, experts claim that this tremor anticipation theory has no basis in science. Well, but still. Psychic adherents also say that Nostradamus' dry earth prediction would be referring to the ongoing crisis, which has spawned an uptick in droughts and fires nationwide. So there you go. That's very interesting. You know, that thing, I mean, if I was unaware that they had for 2 years prior to the 2011 Fukushima, the whole devastation, you know, wouldn't be the first time they say at one point there's no scientific evidence and then it turns out there is. So, yeah, that's very interesting. If for some reason these animals, they're feeling things that others just can't. All right. I will be coming back to you guys very, very soon with another round of eerie news. And until then, take care.